So I'm here now at the Canada Strong and Free Network Conference with the leader of the Conservative Party of Quebec, Eric Duhaime. This has become a little tradition at True North where I sit down with Eric and make him practice his English every year at this conference. And he just happens also to be a speaker every year at this conference. I guess English Canada does have a soft spot for Quebec Conservatives after all, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that personally as a fellow French Canadians. So you're here to talk about immigration, which has become quite a prominent issue with the Trudeau mass immigration agenda just coming an absolute disaster with, a lot of people in this country right now. Housing prices are up. You have hundreds of people lining up for jobs. It's just not really sustainable. And I guess Legault is seeing that, and Legault has told Trudeau this week that he's going to call a referendum on immigration if Trudeau doesn't act. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the first thing we need to say is that it's true that there's an immigration crisis in Canada. Obviously, we see it in all the regions, but particularly in Quebec. 50% of those who want to come here as refugee are coming in or entering in Quebec. It's much more than the percentage of the population that we count within the country. So there is a real problem right now, and that crisis is, of course, exacerbated by the policies and the message of the Trudeau government. I think everybody agrees on that. That being said, having a referendum on the issue is not going to solve the question. There's already a large consensus. All the 5 parties in Quebec, the main 5 parties who represent 99% of the population, all agree that Quebec should control more its immigration. And that's the speech I came to give today, to tell Conservatives from all across Canada that we need to make sure that we want to decentralize in terms of immigration. And I saw Danielle Smith, Premier Smith, also had a message last week saying that she wanted more power regarding immigration, because we live in a country that is very diverse, very, very large, very big. The realities in one region compared to the other are very different in matter of housing, in matter of manpower, of linguistic realities. We live in a diverse country, and we need to take that into account in our immigration policies as well. But it's not a referendum that's going to solve the issue. We already know that what Quebecers want. What we need to do is to get rid of the Trudeau Liberals. Unfortunately, the Premier Legault cannot say that because his voters are massively voting for the Liberals federally, and he's probably scared politically that it could cost him a few political points. But that's the reality. I mean, we need a change of government. And what I also said today is that, yes, we have an immigration crisis. Yes, we have a housing crisis. Yes, we have an economic crisis. But at the end of the day, we have more than that. We have a political leadership crisis in this country. We have a guy who's been prime minister for too long that is mismanaging every single file that he's touching. And I hope that we're going to have an election, the sooner the better, and we can have a new reality that is going to take over, because there's the crisis is right now is in the PMO. It's in the Prime Minister's office.
There seems to be a lot of frustration for sure, and a lot of people wanting that election to come. I do want to ask, after October 7 in Quebec, we've seen some very disturbing, radical pro-Hamas rallies, both in the streets in places like Montreal, but also on university campuses at McGill, at Concordia. Has Legault done enough to address this issue?
No. And even at synagogues also, we saw things that were totally unacceptable.
Like bullets being...
Bullets in schools and synagogues. We need to do much more, and we need to also make sure that, we always take into account in Quebec in particular, will they speak French? Like the newcomers, are they going to speak French? Well, we now have a policy where the strong majority of immigrants come in Quebec and speak French, often even better than me. But the thing is it's not the language problem. It's the cultural problem and the integration problem, because even if they speak the language, they don't feel Canadian in any way, form, or shape. And they talk about Canada as your country. It's not their country, even if they're born here after a generation or two. And we saw what the slogans, they've imported the hatred from outside, and that's very concerning. And that's why we should look at other criterias than just the language when we're talking about immigration in Quebec.
Yeah, no, for sure. Another issue that's impacting a lot of Canadians right now is the carbon tax. It's become super unaffordable for many people, even after the so-called rebate is kicked in. But in Quebec, there's not even a federal rebate. You met with farmers, because the farmers in Quebec have been standing up and saying enough is enough, we don't want this tax. Why was it important for you to go and talk to the farmers. And what did the farmers tell you?
The farmers are sick and tired. There's also a crisis where I was talking about all those crises emerging everywhere. There's also a farming crisis all across Canada, and even in Europe right now, we can see it. But it's a crisis that is fed by the government, and especially in Quebec. You know, we have a government that says that they want to become the world leaders in terms of environment for our farmers. Well, there's a cost to that. Quebec is one of the poorest states or provinces in North America, but we want to be the world leader in terms of environment, and our farmers right now are paying the price, and it's huge. They have now environmental new taxes. They have all sorts of regulation, all sorts of papers that they need to fill. So their message is, get the government out of my way. That's the main message that they're asking right now, and I think they're totally right to ask that. And I'm concerned about the government and the other parties at the National Assembly, because if you look at what they did with the energy file, and they've adopted a bill saying, oh, we're not going to exploit our natural gas in Quebec, even if we have one of the largest reserves unexploited on Earth. We're not going to touch it. We're going to import 100% of our gas from outside because we want to make sure that our environmental record looks good. Are they doing the same thing with the agriculture now? Are they telling us that they're going to shut down the industry and try to make sure that we import 100% of what we eat because we want to make sure that it looks good in terms of our environmental record? That's what I'm concerned about, and that's why I'm with the farmers right now.
Right, no, and that is concerning because, as we know, no farmers, no food. It's really that simple. You also recently came out against double mastectomies for young, gender-confused girls, and this came in the midst of this report by Radio-Canada called Transexpress, which I think shocked a lot of people that maybe weren't familiar with how gender-affirming medicine is performed in Canada. Why was that something that you felt the need to speak up on? Because it is a very politically controversial issue.
Well, first off, because the parents were really concerned. For those who didn't see the Radio-Canada, this French CBC report, they sent a young girl, 14 years old girl, to see a physician, and it took her 9 minutes to get transition pills. And that was like very, very shocking for a lot of people. And I actually also met Premier Higgs from New Brunswick, who was here today, and we talked about that because he's going to table a bill on that same issue as well in the near future. And Alberta also, I talked about it with Danielle Smith because she's also doing something out there. We need to protect our kids. I mean, there is currently, it makes no sense that a kid after 9 minutes without parental approval could get access to such pills in such an easy way. There's something completely wrong, and that's why I stood up and I talked about it. Even if it's controversial, I think we need to stand up for our principles.
Yeah, no, for sure. In reaction to the Danielle Smith announcements, and the federal Liberals have taken the side of more of the activists, and for example, Randy Boissonnault, who is an openly gay minister in the Trudeau government, said that this is the NATO movement for the LGBT community, essentially that they're restricting this sort of healthcare, which more and more experts are warning about, may not be the solution for some of these kids, is actually an attack on the LGBT community, and that those gay people who support this are almost traitors. What do you make of this? I know you're the first openly gay leader of a political party. You oppose this.
Yes.
Why is that? And what's your message to those activists to say that you would have to support this
those
because of your
activists
sexual
are
orientation?
Completely wrong. First off, it's not because you're gay that you're a socialist. It's not an ideology, it's a sexual orientation. I think that's the first thing that we need to put crystal clear. The second one is we need to look at where were the most progressive policies in that matter. It was in Sweden in particular, but in Scandinavia, and even in the UK. And all those countries are currently backtracking because we have very little data, because of course there's not that many people who do the transition, and it takes a long period of time to figure out what's going on. But the people who were the first ones to implement such policies are now moving backward, and it's coming from the left, it's coming from the people who used to be the activists. So we need to look at what's going on out there and not repeat the same mistake back here in Canada.
I wanted to talk about the polls.
Yeah.
So in 2022, Legault was reelected despite, not he was arrogant, in my opinion, at least. You know, he had locked down the province quite extremely, and they rewarded him with quite a majority. Now he would lose pretty badly. What's happened? Why have Quebecers suddenly turned their backs on him?
It's been a year now, almost day to day, that the slippery slope started for the Legault government, and they lost almost half of their supporters within the last year. Why? Because they betrayed people. Like on many issues that they were saying one thing during the election campaign, and they did the exact opposite over the last year. The economy is not going well. Their track record is terrible. The healthcare system is not fixed. The education system is getting worse and worse. The deficit now this year, $11 billion. Only BC is doing worse than us right now in Canada. And we have a government who promised the exact opposite. They were supposed to fix healthcare. They were supposed to lower our taxes. They were supposed to balance the budgets. They were supposed to, make sure that the education system was even better. On every single front, Quebecers now feel that it's worse off than before the CAQ arrived, and that's why they're going down. If there were an election today, the Conservatives, we would win 5 seats. It's not the end of the world, but at least we would be present in the National Assembly. But and there's still 2 years and a half, and we're going to work very hard for those 2 years and a half to make sure we're much more represented in the National Assembly.
Those polls also show that the Parti Québécois, which the separatist party, which a lot of people thought was dead after they had a really abysmal result in 2022, they would come back, and we know that they want to bring back the debate on separation, which so many people thought was finally over. Do you think we're going to get to the point where we're again going to be talking about Quebec separatism and referendums? It's
weird because Quebecers do not want a referendum. Quebecers, if there were a referendum today, they would vote no more than in 1980 and much more than in 1995, the last 2 referendums. So it's weird to see that the party that is proposing it is going up. But you also have to understand that a lot of the CAQ voters used to be former Parti Québécois supporters who supported Legault, who himself is a former Parti Québécois minister, we have to recall. And those people, when you're disappointed of your new choice, what do? It's like in a couple. Often when you divorce with your wife or your husband, the first thing you go back with your former boyfriend or girlfriend. But unfortunately, after a few weeks or a few months, you figure out that it's much worse, and that's the reason why you left in the first place, and you're looking for a new home. And I think that's what's going to happen, politically speaking, in Quebec in the next few months.
I guess lastly, you kind of touched on what I was going to close off with, is a lot of the Parti Québécois people are actually quite, I would argue, culturally and even socially conservative. Are you confident that you can win enough over?
Yes, there's a lot of, all the people who are on the right of the political spectrum, and even center right now. I think that we can offer a good alternative. The Parti Québécois is becoming more and more radically on the left on many issues, and people are not maybe aware of it because, it's a new leader, and it's, they're not completely, they haven't talked that much about their policies, but I'm quite confident that over the next few months, because on many issues you see it, we're always alone. Like the 4 parties, they are often unanimous on huge issues, and we're the only ones saying no, it makes no sense. And I think that we're going to be able to bring back all those common sense people. And there's also going to be a federal election coming up in Quebec. We could make a breakthrough as Conservatives in Quebec, and I think that's going to also pump up the base, and I think that's also going to bring back a lot of Conservatives home.
Well, Eric Duhaime, thank you so much as always for making time at this conference.
Thank you very much.